Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. Quarterbacks, tight ends, week 10. That's where we're at here. Happy Thursday morning. I'm going to be available tonight for any of your start sit questions starting at about 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. So be there or be square if you have any questions, of course, or just hang out. It's always fun there. And then, other than that, I'm always available on Saturdays and on Sunday mornings, 2.5 hours prior to kickoff at least. For any of your start sit questions, then Saturday evenings, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Come hang on out, ask questions, talk football, etc. You're very, very welcome to come join us. It's been a good time on Saturdays, especially. Other than that, we're going to, of course, be going through the rankings of the quarterbacks and the tight ends as you will see them as I unveil them in tiers on the screen. We'll start off with the quarterback position. You can see I also have projections. You can find all of these projections, these pages that we're looking at up on the internet on my website, which there are links to down in the description. Without any further ado, I will show you this if you want a simpler version. At the bottom of the page on the website, you can see this little tab. You can click it there, and you get a little more simpler, just, purely ranks focused page there on this Excel sheet. Without further ado, here are the quarterbacks. I unveiled too much, so we'll just do a little cut there so I don't sneak peek you to the rest of the rankings. But this tier starts off with my quarterback one this week, Lamar Jackson, followed by my quarterback two in Jalen Hurts. Jaden Daniels going against Pittsburgh. Might have to move that behind Josh Allen here. Maybe move Josh Allen up to 3. Jaden Daniels, right? That seems a little bit more likely there. A little tough matchup there for Jaden Daniels. Joe Burrow in a smash matchup against Baltimore. Brock Purdy, my quarterback 6 here. Smash matchup against Tampa Bay. Love the ceiling there, as the projections also show you third highest ceiling within the expected range, at least not necessarily ceiling. And then Sam Darnold here going up against Jacksonville. Another really, really good matchup. You love a lot about that as well. So that's the first tier. These are the must starts. You can see the temperature gauge, the matchup gauge here. Red hot, that's a good thing. We like red hot. That sanitizes things. That's good, Red to blue is how this works in terms of what you're seeing on the screen. Unless, of course, we're talking about my loves and my fades. And there in the green, you can see my first love. And in the red, you can see my first fade for this next tier. How far down are we? All right, so that fits on the screen a little bit better. This tier starts off at my quarterback 8, goes down to my quarterback 12. Going to be talking about some of these guys. Going to show you how much I love Tua Tagovailoa. Going to talk about Stafford. How much I hate Kirk Cousins at my quarterback 11. And then Kyler Murray here. We're going to discuss a little bit about that. So Baker Mayfield still sitting up here at quarterback 8. He's been averaging still 20 fantasy points without his weapons. Maybe he gets Mike Evans back this week. I don't think that changes his rankings at all. I'm not currently expecting that. But they found a way to be able to move the ball. San Francisco's not scary enough of an opponent given all of the rest of the quarterbacks. Not a great quarterback wide receiver week this week. There will be surprises, I'm sure, and I'm sure that if there was ever a week I had to bet on, am I going to get all of these rankings perfect in order? I would never bet on that, but especially this week, I wouldn't bet on that, or I would need some really good odds on that. There's a lot that's could and will go wrong with the rankings this week, I'm sure. And that has nothing to do with my rankings. That just has to do with how this week lines up. You'll see. So Tua Tagovailoa, my love of the week here for the quarterback position. I only do one love, one fade. Last week, how did I do with my love? Well, I loved Bo Nix. Finishes at the quarterback 18, a little bit lower than where I had him ranked, even 18.7 fantasy points. So that's good. It was a strong quarterback week. It was a little bit disappointing to me. I wanted a little bit more from Bo Nix. It felt like he felt short of the hopes and the expectations I had for him. He throws a pick. We don't throw that pick, and we throw a touchdown instead. 24.7 fantasy points. That's what I was talking about. We didn't quite get there. And then for my fades, CJ Stroud, that came true. Finished as the quarterback 23. So that was not a great week for him. That's going to move us in on to my love this week, Tua Tagovailoa. To me, this feels like a get-right game for Miami. That's where I'm at mentally at this point in the week for this matchup. And it's not necessarily because the Los Angeles Rams have been some sort of smash defensive matchup. They've actually been kind of average at this point in the season. They've gotten a little bit better as the season has gone along. Whether they win or not is a different story, but for fantasy purposes here, I'm liking the Miami Dolphins offensive players. I'm low-key willing to play a lot of the pieces across these positions for this Miami offense, despite, a lot of them being letdowns in one way or another up to this point in the season. So I'm just on the Miami offense this week. Matt Stafford is somebody that we're going to just a couple of comments on. He was close to being a love for me on the opposite side of the ball because I'm essentially expecting this to be a shootout between Miami and the Rams. That's kind of what I was talking about in terms of almost wanting pieces of this Miami offense or being more willing to play them this week than, I feel like we should based on the production we've got up to this point in the season. So Miami has been a very, very good pass defense on the season. That's why I do have Stafford behind Tua Tagovailoa. It's a much tougher matchup on paper at least, but I'm willing to take a shot on it with Stafford in a game that once again I expect could turn into a bit of a shootout. And I think that Stafford and his weapons have enough when they're, when things are rolling for them to overcome a really tough matchup in that Miami secondary, which I think maybe overperformed so far because teams haven't had to pass on them as much. But still, even via DVOA, they've been a quite good defense, so that is a little bit concerning. And that's going to bring us on to Kirk Cousins, who I have as my quarterback 11 this week, going up against the New Orleans Saints, and in many ways, this is a repeat of last week. Though, last week, I did not end up fading Christian Kirk Cousins, we'll just call him Kirk. I had ranked him significantly lower than the experts had ranked him last week and this week. Both times so far right now, he's ranked 8th on the week. Last week, he was ranked 8th via the ECR, Expert Consensus Rankings. And to me, this just seems like lesson not learned in terms of the ranking unless they end up lowering him a little bit throughout the week. Look, the reason that I had him closer to, if not ranked, at his quarterback 15 finish last week compared to how the experts had him much higher was due to game flow expectations. I want quarterbacks who provide higher ceilings than Kirk Cousins does in these types of games. With quarterbacks who do not rush the ball, that means that they need to get into a pissing contest against the other quarterback, against the other team, a shootout type of situation. There was a chance that Dallas would do that against them last week. There was that opportunity. I talked about that. It wasn't that high, I didn't feel like, which was why I was limited on how low I put him, but I also kept him ranked around, I think it was like 12, 13 last week. 11 this week. I believe that the odds of New Orleans being able to, keep up with Atlanta, force them to have to pass the ball more, prevent them from being able to run out the clock, run the ball more, are less than the odds were that Dallas would be able to do that. Now, that being said, and part of the reason why I am actually a little bit higher ranking-wise on Kirk Cousins than I was last week, part of the reason, there's also, not great quarterback situations right behind this, is that Atlanta actually did seemingly pass the ball quite a bit more than I expected. They did not rely on the run. They kind of actually passed the ball to the running back a lot more in that matchup. So it worked out a little bit differently than I expected. So, we don't want to hinge too much based on expectations. And once again, a matchup where I do like the floor for Kirk Cousins. It's hard to imagine that he has a terrible game here, but I do not care for the ceiling. And that's going to bring us on to Kyler Murray, my quarterback 12, who, I'm very afraid of this week going up against the New York Jets. This could have been my bust of the week. Very well could have. This matchup feels much like last week's for Arizona, and I'm not very optimistic about the chances of Kyler running for 50 yards and getting a touchdown on top of that, which is probably, like a rushing touchdown, which is probably what he will need to salvage what will almost certainly otherwise be a pretty lackluster day in the box score for him. So, I'm, Last week, I put a little bit of faith in him. This week, I'm putting less faith in him in the rankings, and I will be looking to move him down further. Let's move on to this next tier of rankings where we might find Kyler by the end of the week. That's my quarterback 13 through 20. Starts off with Russell Wilson, followed by Patrick Mahomes, Jared Goff, Trevor Lawrence, Aaron Rodgers, Daniel Jones, Justin Herbert, and CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud going up against Detroit. If Nico comes back, things change here with my ranking with CJ Stroud. It's that simple. That's going to bring us on to this next little tier, Drake May, Bo Nix. Both guys, you can see the projections would have had them much, much higher. As I went through the rankings, I continuously put guys ahead of them, sometimes quite possibly based on name value. It's a weird week for quarterbacks. I don't love it. There will be surprises. I wanted to highlight these two. If you're willing to put your faith in them, they are the quarterback 8 and 13 on the season in that order. Drake May 8, Bo Nix 13. Not on the season, sorry, on a weekly basis. Average fantasy points scored per week for these two. So Bo Nix on the season. And that almost certainly, means that we should have some confidence in ranking them higher. I just don't have that confidence. I lack it, but if you've got it, I just wanted to point that out, that I feel like we're ranking these guys a little too low. So we're going to bring us on to this next tier. Oh gosh, a little spoiler alert. Caleb Williams, a single man tier here. Talk about a guy who doesn't quite project, hasn't had a great season like Bo Nix and Drake May have on a weekly basis. However, we have hope for. He's in a decent matchup against New Orleans. Part of the concern here for Drake May, Bo Nix, is the matchups, Chicago and Kansas City. That's what I'm concerned about. But also, both of them provide that floor, ground attack. They can rush for a bunch of yards. They can rush into the end zone for that 6-point touchdown instead of throwing it for 4. These things, it could work in their favor, might not. Caleb Williams, that really hasn't been part of his fantasy game. New England, it's a decent matchup here, but do you trust him? I really don't. So that's why he doesn't even quite make it into this tier with these guys in much tougher matchups. Derek Carr, good matchup against Atlanta. Yes, doesn't have his weapons. So do you trust him? I don't know. I'd actually rather take a shot on Caleb Williams in a better matchup than Derek Carr this week, despite, obviously, you look how it projects really nicely if he had his weapons. He doesn't have his weapons, and it's been a little while since we've seen that opening Derek Carr that's still impacting these projections by a little way from those early weeks. And then that brings us to our final, 4 quarterbacks of the week. Joe Flacco, Bryce Young, Mason Rudolph, Cooper Rush. I don't think there's too much argument here. Joe Flacco, it might be a little bit different if he was in a better matchup, but Buffalo's a very tough matchup there. So those are the quarterbacks of the week. Let's take a look at the tight ends of week 10. Here we go. We're here. Our first tier of tight ends for week 10 already on the screen. You can see I've got George Kittle ranked first, Trey McBride ranked second, K. Dotton third, Travis Kelce fourth. We could mix and match these in. Well, George Kittle, I think, clearly number 1 here. Trey McBride, K. Dotton, Travis Kelce. We could mix and match these in whatever order, and it would be okay. You can kind of see some varying differences in the floors and the higher and the lower ends of the expected ranges there between those tight ends. But whatever the case, they're the must-starts. You should be playing these guys with full confidence currently. So that's going to bring us on to this second tier of tight ends, which goes from my tight end 5 down to my tight end 9. And we're still playing these guys with a fair bit of confidence, but it does wane as we get towards the end of this tier. We'll talk about those two. This begins with Evan Ingram as my tight end 5, followed by Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid, Jake Ferguson, and Hunter Henry. Dalton Kincaid against Indianapolis. It is one of the better tight end matchups, so hopefully that's a good sign of things to come there. And Evan Ingram is a borderline, could have been in this other tier. Really, I have a lot of faith in that against Minnesota. It's a nice upside matchup there for receivers. Then we're going to talk just a touch about Jake Ferguson going against Philadelphia. It is a tough tight end matchup. Philadelphia's gotten some good linebacker play. They haven't allowed a whole lot of fantasy points to tight ends. How much of that exactly is due to competition, I don't know for sure. But I do know that it's probably not the best tight end in the league, tight end matchup in the league or anything like that. And on top of that, we are missing Dak Prescott, so it's not like there are not concerns for Jake Ferguson. But I have a hard time imagining that Cooper Rush is going to be throwing the ball to too many other people. Who else does he really have to throw to? So I still expect Jake Ferguson to get a good, heavy target share in this offense. And especially if CeeDee Lamb were to miss this week, obviously that could help his floor case. Ceiling, not as strong as it was. He never really quite reached there, but he's been consistent, and I do expect that to continue moving forward. We'll see for sure. There's obviously some risk involved with that. And then Hunter Henry is another guy who I'm kind of taking a stance on at this point. If you've been around me for the last couple of years, Hunter Henry has not exactly been somebody who I've been giving my faith to too often. More often than not, I've advised you not to chase the points with Hunter Henry. But it's a new world. Drake May is in at quarterback there in New England, and he has found his man. So far, he is in the 3 games that they have played that Drake May has started and finished. He has heavily targeted Hunter 5 times, 8 times, 9 times in those 3 games. Hunter caught his only touchdown of the season from Drake May. I think that the connection is real, and I expect it to continue while Drake May is in that quarterback for Hunter Henry. I am more than happy to take, I would say, an expected 7 or more targets based on what we've seen so far with the 5 and 8, 9 targets in those 3 games. So let's move on to this next tier. Whoa. All right, so there we are. Starting off with my tight end 10, we've got Mike Gesicki, followed by TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews, Taysom Hill, Sam Laporta, Zach Ertz, and Jonnu Smith to wrap up this tier. This is a tier where, we're taking chances on guys, I think, more so than we were here, of course, right at the end. We already started to enter that territory, but because of what they've done on the season, a little bit more productive so far than these guys on the season. Now, Mike Gesicki, a little bit of I really should have altered these projections, and I still might, anticipating T. Higgins being out. With T. Higgins out, Mike Gesicki has just really taken on that big slot role for the team and been the next man up and absorbed a lot of that target share that he otherwise does not get. And that's worked out for fantasy purposes, going up against Baltimore here. We're going to give that another shot if T. Higgins is out. Otherwise, he will be lowered in the rankings. TJ Hawkinson going up against Jacksonville. Expect him to start to get utilized a little bit more. Maybe not at 100% yet, but I'm still willing to take a shot on that against Jacksonville in a game where there might be some easy sledding here, and maybe not a whole lot of reason to take the risk on throwing that ball deep to Jordan Addison when you could just take the guaranteed yardage with Hawkinson against a not-so-great opponent in Jacksonville. Mark Andrews going up against Cincinnati. It's a really good tight end matchup. You like that. Taysom Hill, I did want to just chat on that a little bit as well here, going up against Atlanta. Last week, he was my love of the week. So how did I do last week? Obviously, for him, I did really well. He ended up as the tight end 5. I don't know how many other people were on top of that or not. I assume I wasn't the only one, but you are very welcome to those who ended up playing Taysom Hill. It worked out. I'm less confident about that this week. He is not my love of the week this week, but I am feeling willing to take a chance on that repeating to some extent due to the fact that Chris Olave is going to be missing in this game. They're already missing Rashid Shaheed. Not a whole lot of weapons at that point. You bring out the Swiss Army knife and you start to do things with it, and you see what you can get from it. And for those reasons, I'm not out on Taysom Hill, and I'm willing to take him a chance on that upside compared to some of these guys. Now, we still have my fade to cover. How did I do there? My fade was Tucker Kraft, and it wasn't so much a fade as it was like a most likely to disappoint, which is not a whole lot different. Actually, it's the same thing I'm doing with Sam Laporta this week. I don't really have anybody to tell you strictly like, oh, I'm fading this guy, like, watch out for him. We're at the tight end 14 here with Sam Laporta, but obviously a lot of people rely on Sam Laporta. Last week, Tucker Kraft, by the way, was a disappointment. He did come through as a fade for me, so I did go with the tight ends. He scored 5.6 fantasy points, which isn't the worst thing in the world for a tight end, but obviously it qualified for the fade there. And Sam Laporta, kind of anticipating what we've gotten from him most of the season to continue. Unfortunately for him, Jameson Williams is coming back, so our window here for Sam ended, and I think ended disappointingly. Our 2-week window with Jameson Williams gone. It does not really give us hope that even without Jameson Williams, we didn't get more targets his way, more production at the end of the day, especially this last week from him. In terms of going forward for the second half of the season, so I don't know how much longer he's going to be getting ranked this high. Eventually here, we're going to have to kind of give up on him, and I know owners are starting to. He's still on the season in this group, though. Zach Ertz also very much in this group due to consistency. So once again, he just earns that spot. He's consistently gotten targets, and I think maybe has 1 touchdown on the season. But, if those touchdowns were up, he'd be obviously quite a bit better. Jonnu Smith, though, is my love of the week for the tight end position. Someone or some many in this Miami offense will disappoint this week, as I'm kind of a little bit high on all of them to one extent or another. But I don't know which ones are going to disappoint, which ones are going to come through. Tough to tell. The Rams have consistently been one of the better tight end matchups, however, so we're going to try to take advantage of that with Jonnu Smith. If you're really struggling at your tight end, or you want to just take a shot on somebody instead of playing Sam Laporta, etc., this is one of the guys who I think you could go out there, find, and do that with. Part of the reason why I wanted to highlight Jonnu Smith is, if you've been paying attention or not, you might have noticed here over the past 4 weeks, Miami has seemingly found something with Jonnu Smith. They found their big slot kind of guy, what they wanted from OBJ, in Jonnu Smith, I think. And as evidence of that, you can look, he's gotten 8 targets, 7 targets, 6 targets, and 6 targets over the past 4 weeks. So averaging about 7 targets, so that's great to work from. And I kind of anticipate that to overall continue. I'm sure he'll have a down week here or there. Maybe it'll be this week, unfortunately. Who knows? But that's going to bring us on to, I don't know if we're at my final tier. Not quite. Kokomat, Pat Freiermuth, a little mini tier here. Did not quite qualify for that tier because I just have less confidence in these two. But also, based on what they've done in the season, you can see, they're in line here with the projections. So, I still do like them more than these other options once we get to Jatavian Sanders, Will Dissly, Dalton Schultz, Tyler Conklin, Isaiah Likely, Colby Parkinson, Chig Okonkwo, Juwan Johnson. All of these guys really, really tough to trust in my opinion. Jatavian Sanders is somebody who you might want to take a chance on in deeper leagues, especially at tight end. Put him on your roster, see what comes of that. But otherwise, it's been disappointing. Dalton Schultz, maybe we should put Dalton Schultz at the top of this list, maybe even get him in there. It's been really disappointing this season, but for now, if we're not anticipating the return of Nico Collins, it's another week where I guess we're willing to take a shot on Dalton Schultz. So I am going to move him up to my tight end 19 after reading off that list. And I would point out Dallas Goedert currently not being ranked. So that is it for the tight ends. That is it for the quarterbacks for week 10. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope that this helps you. Otherwise, come join me live for any of your start sit questions, and we can get into it a little bit more. Peace out.